Hey, Emma,
Yes, Madelyn.
what do you call it when you're up there sailing in space, tracking the movements of a mystical brew that will give you real soft skin?
What do you call it?
Star motion of the lotion potion. Hello, and welcome to Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
I'm your, if you can't think of a joke, a rhyme's good enough, host Madelyn.
I'm your, I honestly didn't get it, host Emma.
Maybe I should have done a space for the bound and done books or something. Anyway, thanks for tuning in to Talk This. This week on the show, we are talking about Star Ocean, which rhymes with emotion, potion, and lotion.
Yeah.
Also notion, but I couldn't get that one in. When I looked up things that rhyme with ocean, the first website gave me some things that really do not.
Commotion.
Commotion. Star commotion.
There's a lot of stuff you could end with locomotion.
Maybe you should have done the joke. Anyway, that's what we're talking about this week.
Promotion.
What? Promotion? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. I suck. I get it. But yeah, it's talking about some underrated RPG action and some supernatural sadness this week. I played demos for both games.
Oh,
this
wow.
time. Aren't you proud of me?
I am.
Very exciting stuff. Dangerous stuff.
Did you play a demo for the first Star Ocean or the one that I sent you?
No, I played the one you sent me.
Mm-hmm.
I think there is a demo for the first Star Ocean as well, but everybody says the second one's the good one, so
yeah.
I decided to do that. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So Star Ocean, it's a series of games, but the first one came out in 1996 from Triace, also known for Valkyrie Profile, which I think we've talked about on the show before, published by Enix at the time, now Square Enix. And it's one of the earliest action RPGs.
Yeah, it's fun to learn through these old games. It comes up sometimes. It's fun to learn which of Square Enix's franchises were previously Enix and which were previously Square. You know?
Enix really feels like the younger sibling of the group. No offense.
Yeah.
That's why they go second. Of the group is the better in Talk This terms. That means it's the better part of the company.
Oh, right. Now Enix had Dragon Quest, so that's all they really needed.
You're right. Put all your dragon eggs in one basket.
Yeah. But the first Star Ocean to come here to the West, outside of Japan, was actually 2, which is called The Second Story, which was in 1998 for the PlayStation. The original was on the Super Famicom originally. Yes.
Also known as the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, except not because it was not released in the West.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the first one wouldn't come outside of Japan until 2008 with the PSP remaster.
On a handheld system?
Yeah. If you can go...
Oh, wait,
not...
I think I'm not... Nope, but who knew?
No, wait, that was last week.
System, that's something that might be of interest.
No, that was last week.
Was it?
Yeah.
What's time? Oh, you're right. Handhelds is your topic. Yes. So yes, you can go listen to handheld systems. We record these live on Sundays. There's no confusion about which episodes are coming out in which order right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I do like the energy of your sequel not being Star Ocean 2, but being Star Ocean The Second Story. I think more series should do that kind of energy.
Listen, the subtitles for Star Ocean kind of rule.
Actually kind of unhinged, to be honest. Integrity and faithlessness. Look, I know that this
that
game is
one,
not supposed to be good.
that title rules, though.
Yeah.
That title goes hard. It's
It
so
does.
sad that everyone's like, this is the bad one, because that's the one that, like, just reading the titles, I would be like, I want to play that one.
Right? It's very good. It's very striking. Probably don't play that one, but it's very striking.
Certainly don't start with that one. It seems to be the consensus.
So in Star Ocean, you're in this, like, it's technically a sci-fi world, but because the first ones came out in the 90s, it was, like, much more, like, fantasy. But hey, also we're on another planet in the early games, and has, like, moved more toward sci-fi proper over time.
Well, I think that also has to do with, because I learned this and thought, oh, I didn't know that in reading about it. But I think that also comes from this development team was a bunch of developers who left, like, Namco after working on the first Tales of game, Tales of Fantasia, which those are pretty classic fantasy stories most of the time, maybe with a couple of, like, Final Fantasy VII type science-y elements, but mostly fantasy. But they spun off of that team because they wanted to tell a more, like, full story with player impact, as opposed to Tales of, which of course are linear experiences where you go through the story. But that's why it's an action RPG, because the Tales of is action. And also probably why it started more fantasy. The notes on why they chose space were just like, we want it to be expansive. What's more expansive than space? Seems to be the idea, rather than being like, we like space.
They talk about Star Trek being a thing for them too, but yeah.
Sure. But that's probably why it starts more in the fantasy thing, because they were coming off of working on a Tales of game. But yes, it has become more space-like as it's gone forward.
I didn't read anything about Star Ocean really before playing the demo of A Second Story, so it was surprising to me when it was real-time battles. I was not expecting that. It's like 90s RPG, turn-based. Like, I had my dinner in front of me, and I was eating dinner playing it. I was like, it's going to be turn-based, so I'll have opportunities for some bites, and it is not.
Well, it's also using the, like, newly popular HD 2D labeled style, the remake that you played that's coming out in a couple of days, I think, if not already out.
Yeah, I think quite soon.
Yeah. I think it's like November 2nd or something. But so, and all of those have previously been, like, turn-based RPGs, I feel like. So I can see how you would look at the aesthetic and art style and be like, oh, this is like, you know, Octopath Traveler or any one of these other things. But no, it's Tales of, just pixel art. For what it's worth, I do think the Second Story R HD 2D is probably the best looking one of the ones that I've seen that are utilizing that art style. Just in my opinion.
It's a little different, though, this art style, at least than the Triangle Strategy version. Triangle Strategy, which, oh my god, I've once again done the thing where I, like, put it down for a couple weeks. I'm, like, right at the end. What's wrong with me? But it's a little different than that. I mean, Triangle Strategy's art style, and I haven't played Octopath Traveler, so you'll have to tell me, is, like, yeah, it's that HD 2D thing, but it's all pixel. This one is like, you're a pixel dude running around a, like, 3D world. Yeah. Or a pixel gal, if you're me. And that was interesting. I was like, this is kind of a neat take on this.
Yeah, that's sort of what I think most of those games are, like, going for, but this one has leaned more into, like, the 3D-ness of the backgrounds, which I read, like, an interview with one of them that they're thinking about, like, if we were little pixel guys running around, what would it look like? And that's what they went with. But I think it looks really great.
No, it does. It's cool. And a little dangerous, knowing that it's, like, an action one, and, like, just, like, numbers go up. I'm like, uh-oh.
Oh yeah, it's one of like the 6 games being added to my backlog while we're on the trip.
Yeah, I know.
So...
I'm like I have so many games that I have to try to finish for next week's podcast. Next week's podcast?
Yeah.
Next week's podcast.
Yeah.
It's really bad. It's really bad. I really want to finish Lost Judgment, but I also should probably finish Triangle Strategy and like any number of other things. Disaster. Anyway, back to Star Ocean. So the original Star Ocean, there's 3 friends. He plays Roddick, and there's also Millie and Dorn. And like your town gets like afflicted by this illness that's come from the town next door that turns people into stone.
Okay, wait. I think it's important to establish they're cat people.
I'm sorry, yes, forgive me.
Because I read that, I was like, what? Something I had never internalized about Star Ocean was
important
that...
to know that they're cat people. They are not cat people in Star Ocean, the second story, as far as I can tell.
Yeah. Well, there aren't just cat people. There are also, like, bird people and also just humans, I believe.
Yes.
But the cat people are also, like, they're not obviously like, oh, that's a cat girl, that's a cat boy, or whatever. Yeah. Not all of them. They're, like...
It's not a Skyrim
There
situation.
are, like, different subspecies I didn't look too far into. So some of them have really obvious cat ears. A lot of them just have, like, elf ears, sort of. But they all have tails. But looking at like the character art for the main character from like a front view, you have to like be like, oh yeah, there's his tail. It's not, because he wears a big cape too, so it's not terribly obvious. And he's just got like little pointy ears under his hair as well. And there's also some that are like evolved more from tigers rather than cats, so they have like more tiger aesthetic, I guess.
So if that sold you on it. Cats, kind of a theme of both games this week.
Yeah,
perhaps.
True, maybe.
Anyway, Dorn the Catman like plays with a pigeon and gets sick, so like learn your lesson, kids. Mm-hmm. If you are one of those people that feeds pigeons in public parks, like maybe learn your lesson from this game and from my distaste. But you know, with your pal like slowly turning into stone, you're like, oh no, we better save the world. And ultimately, in the end, that involves some time travel to kill a demon king. Which, like, as it should.
Yeah.
But the thing about the Star Ocean series is that it does all take place in the same world, but not in, like, a Final Fantasy way. Like I know in Final Fantasy, it's sort of like, a lot of these take place in the same world, haha. Star Ocean really does take place in the same world, but they often jump several hundred years between, entries.
Yeah.
So it gives me the sense, like, I you know, in starting playing a second story, I was sort of like, oh, I don't know, like, I am liking this. Should I be starting here? But it does not really seem like it matters where you start because they're so far apart from each other.
Yeah. Yeah, second story is like from my impression, is like the favored child of Star Ocean fans.
Yeah.
Which I do have to I'm sure it is good, but I do have to skeptically wonder, like, how much is because they played it as a child, their
right.
first one. But I guess we'll see, you know, when it comes out, if it really is quite good. You never know.
I'm enjoying it. And again, dangerous that I'm enjoying it, because there's too many games.
Yeah. Star Ocean also has, you know, the inspired by Persona 5, I assume.
Yes, probably inspired by Persona 5. Actually, both games this week taking deep inspiration from Persona 5.
Yeah. They have, the first game is called, like, Private Actions, apparently, where you go into a town and, like, the characters, like, will split up within the town, which, like, I like that in a game when you have a party, when you, like, can send your characters in, like, different directions if you want to, but then you can go check in with them and make certain choices with them that can impact both their relationships with your main protagonist and with other characters, I believe. And so their different sort of affection levels will impact that character's ending at the end of the game. So, like, the player choice that they added to Star Ocean that they wanted to from moving out of Tales of... I almost said Fails of, but that's just because I was saying Fantasia.
Slip there.
I was saying Fantasia of by accident.
Sure.
It's not really like the plot moves in like a drastically different direction in the first one. It's like your characters can move in different directions, and that can kind of color the pieces of the ending that you get when you finish the game.
Fire Emblem-y.
Yeah. Speaking of Fire Emblem, there's also like a number of recruitable characters, but you can't recruit all of them in your first playthrough. And if you recruit one, like, you might not be able to recruit another. There's some impact of that. So you can like pick and choose who's actually in your party for a given playthrough to a certain extent. Second Story has this by like you pick your protagonist.
Yeah.
And then I don't think there's as much like you just pick and choose, but each protagonist has one unique party member in that one.
I decided to play as Reyna.
Is that the girl?
Not Claude C. Kenny, which is so funny. She keeps calling him Mr. Kenny.
That's very good.
It is very good.
I like it.
I mean, in typical Madelyn fashion, I have already, like, I was, like, coming back from a mission, and there was, like, one of the harder enemies in the, like, in the remake, at least. I think it seems like it might be genuinely random encounters, in the original. But in the remake, there's, like, you know, little different colored blobs for enemies that you can sneak up on. And there's a colored blob for, like, this enemy's kind of hard. And I was like, ha, like, how hard could it be? I'm, like, an hour into the game. Not even an hour. And then there was an enemy in there that would one-shot me. But here's the problem. There's a retry button, which just sort of puts you back to the beginning of the battle. And there's one that takes you to the main menu when you last saved. And me, being the stubborn person that I am, was like, no, I'm not going backward. I'm playing this for the podcast. I'm not losing progress. So I did fight that fight, like, probably 20 or 30 times. But then I won.
Good job.
And my character gained, like, 5 levels. And I was now super over-leveled for everything else.
That's the classic RPG experience, I think.
But it got me hooked. I was like, ooh, the combat, running around, whacking them with my little knuckles.
Love running around, whacking them with knuckles.
Believe
Punching
it or not, my
them,
strategy is mostly run around in a circle.
That's good.
So hitting that Madelyn core, like, run around in a circle.
Yeah.
My favorite video game thing.
We'll see how people seem excited about Second Story R, but Star Ocean has been sort of floundering for a while. Star Ocean, what is it? Is it 5 or 6? Is the Divine Force 5 or 6?
It's 6.
6. They did release in like the 2002 glut of Square just vomiting out.
I think you mean 2022.
That is what I meant. Wow. Yes, the 2022 glut of Square just vomiting out like AA titles for like 3 months when they released like 20 games in a row or something like that.
Yeah.
They released the Divine Force, which was apparently fine. Was the reaction I saw. It was okay.
Mm-hmm.
You can do like you can glide around in it, which seems neat.
Yeah, love a gliding system.
But like it's not like he doesn't have a paraglider. Like you can like literally like fly around.
I know.
But so and Integrity and Faithlessness was also apparently not very well received, and the remaster of the first one that they put on the PS4 was apparently like, this is fine. So it's just been a lot of like, well, this is fine for like half a decade now. And, you know, Square Enix has said some stuff about, like, wanting to focus on core series now. So we'll see if Star Ocean sinks beneath the sea of stars. That's a different game.
Nice. No, it's somebody at Square must be a fan, right? Because this, smacks of a series where normally on this show we'd be like, it got pretty regular releases for 10 years, and then there hasn't been another one since PS3, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this one does have Divine Force that came out last year. Integrity and Faithlessness was 2016, 2015, I think.
Yeah.
So it's definitely, the pacing of it has slowed down for sure. But it's there is a new one, and they have been doing these remakes. So it does sort of feel like, oh, there's somebody here who's part of that little cult following of this, because it's definitely getting more love than many kind of comparable series like this that I think we talk about on the show. And it definitely has a core fan base. There are a lot of these reviews of 6 that are I wouldn't recommend this to anyone really, but I love Star Ocean, so
yeah.
I'm gonna play it.
That's how it is sometimes with series.
I don't know. I have to admit that when there is a series like this that I'm I'm enjoying, it's not at all like this game, so please take this with a heavy grain of salt. But I'm ooh, this could be a new Trine for me.
Yeah.
I'm all the games are pretty accessible,
Uh-huh.
Fun in a low key way. Yeah, this could be the new Trine.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think they're a little bit longer than the Trines, so not quite right. But
what am I guess I got this one on the PlayStation. Is it on Switch?
I think yes. I think it's coming to most systems.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm I'll be doing some. I'm not gonna bring the Switch on our travels. I don't have space for that. But I'm other travels maybe. It does feel like a kind of game that could be good. I know you don't believe in playing the Switch on a train, but feels like it could be good for that.
The Amtrak I get the Amtrak, whatever, just not the subway. I don't know.
Fair enough.
Yeah, it's coming to everything except Xbox and Mac, obviously.
Obviously, yes.
Obviously.
Macs.
Exactly.
No, I'm really enjoying. I did not expect to really enjoy the demo. I was oh, thank goodness, a demo. Probably this is not going to be my thing. And I had already played some of the demo of A Space for the Unbound, and I was oh, I don't know. I did download this, but should I actually do it? And I'm glad I did, because it's fun.
The other fun thing about Second Story R that people noticed in the demo is you can switch the character portraits from the way they looked in the original release, the way they looked in the PSP remaster, and the way they look in this new remake, which is extremely funny because they're just so emblematic of those eras of anime character portraits in games. You've got the really 90s one, with the I don't know, look up your 90s aesthetic Twitter or whatever. The Sailor Moon, weird looking gremlins. And then the PSP ones are really flat shaded and cutesy, They've really toned down her long elf ears. And then the modern one is really shaded, sort of realistic style anime art. And it's just really you look at them and you're man, yeah, that is what that looked like at that time. It's fun.
This is another one of those games where they're running around touting oh, it's fully voice acted now, which was a big thing when it came out too, that it had a tiny little bit of voice acting on the Super Nintendo and on the PlayStation. It was oh my god, they needed a special chip for the Super Famicom because the voices took up too much space.
Yeah.
Which maybe we should go back to that. Maybe games would be better if we went back to voices taking up too much space. But it is a game where I'm I don't know, do I really want voices here? There's a fair bit of talking and I just kind of want to move through it.
I've gotten I feel bad about it from time to time, but with games like this, I just when I feel they've hit a good stopping point in the sentence and I've read the rest of it, I just move to the next line, you know.
What is the psychological reasoning for that? Because I feel like I approach it the same way. I'm like, I have to cut it off. Like, I can't just, like, cut them off in the middle of a line. I was doing more of that when I was preparing for the show, because I was like, let me get through as much of this as possible. But I do it in Triangle Strategy, too. It's like, okay, like, you're at
I feel like
great.
I feel like I do absorb it better than if I'm, like, really cutting them off in the middle of the line. Like, the conversation still sort of sounds like it flows, even if they're not fully finishing the information from one thing to another.
Yeah.
Whereas if I was just, like, I was cutting them off in the middle of a word, I feel like that would also disrupt my flow of, like, processing the conversation. So
Okay, I hear that.
Yeah.
Well, Star Ocean, a Madelyn recommend, based on my hour and a half of the demo. I have an hour and a half left of the demo. Till the 3 hours cuts off.
My broken brain is still like, maybe I should check out Integrity and Faithlessness. Like, if everyone's like, it sucks, I'm like, oh.
But the title.
It sucks?
It's... Finish Cold Steel first.
It's the same sort of like, I like Final Fantasy 13, but that's why I tried that, like, as one of my first, like, venturing outside of, like, 7 Remake and 15. It's like, it sucks? I gotta try it.
Too hipster.
Alright, let's move on. Speaking of things that don't suck.
A Space for the Unbound.
Yeah.
It's an adventure game from Mojicon Studio that came out this January after a very long development cycle. Published by Toge Productions and Chorus Worldwide after some lovely scandal with their original publisher.
I read through the publisher stuff, and it's sort of wild. It's more, we've done a lot now that's like, oh, this guy sucked recently, you know?
Yes, that's games for you.
That's very straightforward, though. I understand that. This guy sucked. This was like, it's some, like, slightly insidious nonsense with contracts.
Yeah, so to talk about this before we talk about the game at all, A Space for the Unbound, Mojicon Studios is an Indonesian game development team. The game takes place in 1990s Indonesia, right? Not a lot of games set in Indonesia yet. And not a ton of, like, they talk about this in some of the interviews in the lead up. There's, like, not a huge game industry in Indonesia. There's, like, a healthy indie scene, but there's not a lot of funding support. And so this is, like, highly anticipated game, I think, for the scale of what it is, anyway. And then their original console publisher, P-Cube Games, apparently were like, oh, okay, like, we've got this Indonesian team, underrepresented voices in games. Let's get some diversity money from some console platform. They don't ever talk about who it was, but some console platform's diversity fund. All sounds well and good. Good idea, right? Get your bag. Absolutely. Except it's not really your bag, is it? It should sort of be the team's bag, given that they are the people who are underrepresented. And they got this diversity funding, and then they were like, not only are you not going to get this, but we're actually going to use this as a bargaining chip to get more money.
Yeah.
Just like, insane. So it all worked out in the end, but, like, yikes.
Yeah, so that was part of why the development cycle was quite long, because when this happened, they put it, essentially, the game on indefinite. It's not going to come out until we fix this, essentially. Mm-hmm. So some of it wasn't even like they were still working on it. Some of it was just like our publishers being an asshole.
Yeah. Anyway, that's the behind the scenes. The game itself, like we said, set in the 90s in, like, semi-rural Indonesia, follows a dude named Atma and his girlfriend Raya, both of whom, as one does, have supernatural powers.
Yeah.
So, once again, inspired by Persona 5.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Atma has the power. It's got, like, a special book that lets him space dive into other people's hearts to, like, help them resolve, like, personal issues. That's what I mean. Persona 5. The mashup this week is just Persona 5.
This is more Psychonauts, actually, but go on.
Okay, fair. I don't like you jump into people's like mind palaces.
I guess you don't really help them resolve their issues exactly, though.
You beat them up until they feel bad.
There is a little bit of that, to be fair. There is one.
Yeah.
The first day's like major mind dive is, in fact, well, actually, mostly guard until they've changed their ways rather than beating up. But whatever. Either way.
Anyway, so Atma can like jump into people's hearts and help them out. Raya has the power to like manipulate space time a little bit.
Yes.
And the two of them are in love.
Yes. So I talked about this because I played it at the beginning of the year. Very, very Emma core game. I feel like I didn't explain this well on the thing that I talked about, so I thought about it. I was like, what are things that are like, oh, Emma would like this, you know? Coming of age stories. Love those. Magical realism. We talked about they have these weird supernatural powers. You don't really know what's going on. Fractured multiple identity stuff. Which as you go into, you start to see a little more of, where you're not quite sure who's who and what's going on. Devotion, love that borders on unhealthiness is something that you get into later in this as well. Going through grief is sort of like the central conflict of this. And also weird little minigames.
Gotta have those weird little mini games.
I love a weird little minigame.
It's your tour through Emma Core here today.
So if all that sounds interesting to you, I highly recommend this. I really did enjoy this game a lot.
Again, this one I was like, I played the demo. No, the demo on Switch. It sounds like there's now a more expansive demo on PC than this that includes the first chapter of the actual game. And not that the prologue isn't the actual game, but, you know.
Yes, the prologue does not get into, like, where the plot summary would expect you to start, essentially.
Yes. Which, again, I had not read anything about this game before I played that demo, so I was like, oh, cute. Me and my little girl writer friend. And now it's like, oh, maybe she's not real. Anyway, it was like, so, you know, I played through that. I played through the whole demo on Switch, which is the whole prologue. Which, you know, I mean, it's very adventure game, right? Yeah. Like, especially that prologue, you do just kind of do a lot of, like, running between screens. Which is fine. That's fine. But, yeah, it's an interesting demo in that it's very much like, oh, and now you wake up from the dream, and, like, what's gonna happen? So it's a bold choice, I would say, because like it definitely, for me, I did very much have the reaction of, oh, what's going to happen next? But you could also definitely have the reaction of like, oh, that was useless. So it's much more of a like TV cliffhanger kind of choice than I think games demos often are, which was fascinating to me.
It is also like very slice of life in its pacing. You know, even though there's this magical realism stuff going on and events do start ramping up towards the end, a lot of it is just wandering around. There's not hundreds. There's like dozens of stray cats that you can all pet and name as well. Every time you pet one, you pick a name for that cat, and then Atma remembers what name he's given all the different stray cats of
just like Lost Judgment
of his town. It's good. Or like there's like the riddle squad. You can go around town and pick up riddle answers so that they'll give you, like, gum stickers.
Just like Professor Layton.
Exactly. And all these little stuffs. The sort of central thing after the prologue is you and Atma and Raya make a bucket list, essentially. So all of hers are ones that end up being covered by the main game, but all of Atma's are like things that are like little side activities you can do in sort of slice of life ways as you're going through the main story. So it's a very relaxed kind of game, even as it gets into more intense territory near the end, which is nice. There's not a lot, you could argue, like, not to... We're kidding with the Persona stuff. We're always kidding with the Persona stuff.
Persona 5, much like the last... I mean, this game is also inspired by the game that invented narrative.
Right. Right.
So, take us with a healthy grain of salt here.
But it's like if Persona 5 had really committed to, like, that one part where you have to find your subway car, I feel like.
Oh, you're not selling me on it now. I hear that, I'm like, oh, maybe I'm not interested in this.
Well, it's just like, you run around and do things in Persona, but you're never, like, really chilling. You're, like, min-maxing.
It's always in pursuit of numbers go up.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
So it's more like if it just committed to, like, you're wandering around the city and experiencing the city,
Yeah.
I read a lot with the creators of, like, they just really wanted to make something that captured their, like, high school experience in Indonesia, essentially.
I feel like more of these sort of, esoteric, like, personal setting type games are, like, breaking out into the, not mainstream, but, like, beside the mainstream the past couple of years.
What, vibing?
No, I just mean, like, this one is like, oh, this team really wanted to make a game about Indonesia, and, like, Chia is like, oh, they really wanted to make a game right about New Caledonia, and it's just, it's interesting to me that this is like, obviously people do this always, but I feel like there's more of these sort of, like, small breakout hits, the past couple of years, that the thread tying them together is, like, this is a game set in a place that games aren't usually set.
Yeah, I think about, like, Venba from
that too.
This year, too. I think it's neat. It's good.
I do, too.
I like it.
Sorry, that was not a like. That's a bad thing, to be clear.
I feel like, you read a lot of books and watch a lot of movies that are about, like, specific places, but games don't. Games are always more... here's the world we've made up anyway. I feel like it's more common than being set in some sort of reality in the first place. So that sort of eliminates, like, setting it in a specific place as well. So I think it's neat that there are more voices that are able to set things in a place, And
it's really brave that AAA is moving into that space, too. I mean, like, the little known hamlet of New York City.
Oh, right.
For Spider-Man 2 is really brave.
That has its own set of problems, I feel like, because they have to butcher the city.
Whatever. There was an article being like, where's Red Hook? And I was like, good riddance, to be perfectly honest. Like, actually, I don't think the IKEA needs to be in there.
I guess there's specific places, and then there's specific places,
I think I know what you mean.
Like, I don't think a space for the... I could be wrong, for what it's worth. I don't think a space for the Unbound is set in, like, a town you can go visit. Like, you can go to New York.
Although he does talk... The lead developer does talk in a bunch of articles about... like, the anime pilgrimage idea.
Right.
Of, like, you can, like, see something in an anime and go there for real. And so while I doubt that this is set as, like, this is literally this town, I'm sure that there are things in it that are, like, this is literally this store.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that's fair.
But that's probably true in Spider-Man, too. It was also interesting to me, like, space diving is obviously something that's, like, pretty core to the game, is, like, diving into people's brains, hearts, whatever. But they also talk in some interviews about how it took them a while to settle on that. Like, for a while they were kind of making this as a game that they didn't really know what it was mechanically.
Yeah.
They were just like, we want to make a game that's about Indonesia and kind of, like, inspired by your name. basically, which you would have to tell me if that's a good. Every article was like, it's like your name, and I'm like, I haven't watched that.
There's specifically, I don't know if you've seen the meteor yet in the game, but there's specifically like a meteor in A Space for the Unbound, and also your name is all about a meteor.
I was about to say that I had, but no, it's that there's a meteor in Star Ocean.
Yeah. I would hope so. At least one. So yeah, yeah, I see it. I see the comparison. It's not quite the same, but
anyway, it really seems like they started out making this game as like, we've got kind of a vibe, and it took them a couple of years to be like, okay, but what's actually the game? Because then they talk about how, like, oh, actually, believe it or not, like, picking a central mechanic really helped us, like, clarify some of the story beats. Like, who would have guessed?
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that would help. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it is also super interesting, though, because they had that prologue chapter released, like, 2 full years or more.
Even more in 2020.
Yeah, from its full release. Which apparently was also helpful of being like, okay, we have this. I guess it's like we talked about BioShock Infinite when they were like, here's the E3 trailer. And they're like, we have this now.
Yes, like it's done. This is the name.
So it's like, we have this and now we can build from it. Because I read one interview where they're like, did it feel limiting after a while or like whatever? But it doesn't seem like it ever did.
Yeah. Well, it's a little easier when what you've released is sort of a separate prologue anyway. Separate vibey prologue.
But I like the space dives are fun. It is definitely very adventure game minus like the weird little mini games I've mentioned, which I guess is also part of the adventure game genre. But I'm very fond of the little, like, there's like a little fighting game mini game on like day 2, which is cute. But essentially, there's like a bunch of like little space dives where you go into someone's head to help them out and maybe pick up an item you need for a different space dive so that you can continue making progress. And then each day also has like a major one with one of the major supporting characters that closes out that day. And that's where you start noticing some of the oddities happening that fuels the story forward. I don't know if you're going to play it or not, so I'm speaking vaguely, but
I'm like contemplating it, and it's all the reviews are like, don't spoil it, so I think it's wise to not spoil it, if not for me, then for the listening public. But thinking about it, the main thing holding me back from playing it is the many other games.
There's always so many other games.
Yeah.
So many others.
The main thing holding me back is every time I talk to Aurora, she's like, when are you going to play The Last of Us Part 2? And I'm like, I know. I'm sorry.
Never. Never.
My work for me.
But yeah, like, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to ask if it's MASH time, but you had a final thought. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, I think it's probably my game of the year or one of my games of the year. Wow. So, if anything we've talked about with A Space for the Unbound sounds interesting to any of you listeners, I do recommend it because I think it's really great. I know I'm a little biased because I just went through how Emma core it is, but
if any of that is you core,
yeah, you know. Exactly. If we have any crossover there,
any core crossover. Speaking of crossover, let's mash these up.
Yeah.
Okay, gotta be a meteor. Gotta be cats.
Meteor and cats.
Probably some, like, magic-y stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. We could set it in, like, a specific place, but, like, space. Like, they live on Pluto. I don't know why I picked Pluto.
Pluto is a little too mainstream, I think.
They live on Venus? Mercury?
I was thinking Mercury.
And we could think about, like, they'd be like aliens, but we could think about, like, you know, how would someone live on Mercury?
Right. Presumably pretty fast. Or very slow. Like, Mercury rotating the sun fast, and I feel like the society could either be very fast-paced, or they could be kind of rebelling against how fast
like their
celestial
day-night
journey
cycle
is.
is. That's also, we could have like a day-night cycle that's more like realistic in time.
Yeah.
Because it's on Mercury.
Yeah. It'd be like, this really is. I actually, hang on. Let's do some science research here. How long is a day on Mercury? Oh, I have bad news for you.
What, is it longer?
One Mercury solar day is 176 Earth days.
So how many minutes is that?
What do you mean, how many minutes is that? It's the length of 176
Oh, I see.
days.
I see. I was thinking of it backwards. Yeah,
No.
okay. Yeah.
The day on Mercury is actually about as long, is exactly as long, in fact, as 2 Mercury years.
So it's like near instead.
Wait a minute. Now I'm seeing contradictory things. But this
was
is
the
from
Google
NASA.
chat bot trying to lie to you?
But it's from NASA. It's pulling it from NASA. Hang on. Oh, interesting. I'm so sorry, listeners. We're learning about Mercury now. Here we go. From NASA, nasa.gov. Mercury spins slowly on its axis and completes one rotation every 59 Earth days. But when Mercury is moving fastest in its elliptical orbit around the sun, each rotation is not accompanied by a sunrise and sunset like it is on other planets. The morning sun appears to rise briefly, set, and rise again from some parts of the planet's surface. The same thing happens in reverse at sunset. One Mercury solar day, the full day-night cycle, equals 176 Earth days. I can't say I 100% understand that, but...
I don't fully understand it either. But we can make it...
Something about it gives it... But this is kind of interesting, because something about it gives it, like, multiple sunrises and sunsets in a day, is what it sounds like to me.
That does sound interesting. You could do something mechanically with that. Could be a good
day-night cycle, fun day-night cycle thing.
Okay, so they're on Mercury. They're some sort of alien species. They're got cat ears, probably, for some reason.
Sure.
Why
Cat's
not?
like sitting in the sun. That seems good.
And you're living in a town with your buds, right? And then you get, like, news. There's, like, a meteor coming to you.
Yep.
And there's, like... So it's sort of like, the end of the world is coming sort of thing.
Okay.
And, like, you're, like, sort of just living your life, like, with that until, like, eventually you get, like, the call to, like, save the world. So you get, like, the balance between, like, the traditional, like, RPG plot structure with also, like, you're just sort of vibing in your town, like, all coming to terms with the impending death coming upon your civilization.
So, just to get this totally straight, you're in, like, a planetary system with, like, a day-night cycle, and, like, something is gonna come and destroy the world, and you have to figure out how to stop that?
Sure.
I think that there might be a critically acclaimed game that is based on a similar premise.
What is it?
Outer Wilds. I think as long as we lean into the slice of life of it all.
Yeah, like, I think what Outer Wilds is missing is, like, the community aspect that I would want to put into this.
It's actually not unlike if we took Outer Wilds and mashed it up with, shoot, what is that game that I'm playing but I'm never gonna finish? Where you're biking and taking photos.
Oh, letter? Message from the future? Season.
I was like, not letter. Yeah, not
Season letter from the future.
Whatever. Season.
Yes.
Season. Something for the future. Yeah, kind of like a mix between that and Outer Wilds a little.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think even Season is not really about, like, being in a community, though. It's more like you're going to, like, different disparate elements, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like
So,
you leave your community.
I
I'm not
want-
saying it's exactly the same, but the vibes feel similar.
I really want this to have, like, you have, like, a centralized, like, town that you live in, you know?
Yeah.
With, like, people you know. And, like, while you're doing some, like, RPG adventuring stuff that builds up as you go, you're also, like, connecting with the people in the town and, like, helping them through their crises of faith on the end of the world or whatever.
That seems good. This seems like a decent game. If they can market A Space for the Unbound as like their marketing tagline for this game is like, it's a game about depression and anxiety, which I think is sort of funny.
It is very funny.
So I feel like, yeah.
For what it's worth, it is, but...
No. I'm not saying that that's
it is a funny
incorrect.
marketing tagline.
It's just weird that that's the blurb.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like we could be like, it's a game about existential dread on Mercury.
Yeah. And they're cats.
And did you know that Mercury's day-night cycle is kind of weird?
Exactly.
Cool. Alright, I can vibe with that. Well, listeners, this has been another episode of Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
Do you have any thoughts on this week's show? Are you one of those like cult fans of Star Ocean who's out there ready to tell Emma that actually the best place to start with the games is actually integrity and faithlessness because it only goes up from there? It's like telling someone to start with Yakuza 3, Emma. I feel like that's the vibe that I got. Are you have you played A Space for the Unbound? And would you market it as a game as about depression and anxiety? Can you explain to us how day and night works on Mercury? Because the NASA site is kind of confusing and it's kind of important for this game idea, so would really love some science help. If you have thoughts on any of this or anything else that we talked about this week, hit us up on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Talk This Podcast. You can also visit our website, www.talkthispodcast.com, where you can read all about the show, check out the games in the hat, and read our blog featuring long-running series Liquid Boyfriend and Split Screen. But perhaps most importantly, if you really like Talk This, or even if you sort of like Talk This, you should subscribe. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, Pandora Podcasts, online and on the app, Overcast, Pocket Casts, wherever you can find podcasts. Subscribe to Talk This so you never miss an episode. Next week it's 6 Weeks in Gaming. Whoa! Will I finish all of the games that I intend to finish in time?
No.
What is wrong with you? To believe in me.
I'm sorry.
I have to. I have to do nothing but game this weekend. By which I mean the rest of Sunday. But Emma, in 2 full weeks, what will we be talking about?
In 2 full weeks, for our old game, we will be talking about Siren.
Okay.
And for our new game, we will be talking about a game I unintentionally referenced this episode, Sea of Stars.
Oh, wow. Big space autumn here.
I don't actually know if Sea of Stars is in space. I guess it sort of sounds like it is, but I guess we'll find out.
Way and not have space be something. Sorry.
Yeah, that's true.
So look forward to that in 2 weeks. Look forward to me being like, I stayed up until 3 a.m. and Yagami still doesn't know the answer to this mystery next week.
Right.
And then more podcast on and on and on ad infinitum after that. That's it for this week's show. Emma, have you got a good sign off for us?
This week, I hope that you see a pretty meteor that has no other implications.
A space commotion.